The system is still operating, processes still run in the same order they always have, requests are still submitted through familiar channels, actions are still taken in ways that feel correct, appropriate, and aligned with established procedure. Nothing has been removed, nothing has been announced, nothing has been formally changed. From the outside, the environment appears intact. Screens update, forms accept input, transactions attempt to complete. Interfaces respond as expected. There are no warnings, no alerts, no notices indicating that participation has become conditional. If you are only observing surface behavior, there is little reason to believe anything has shifted. And yet, the way actions resolve is no longer uniform, not in a way that draws attention, not in a way that forces interpretation. The same action no longer guarantees the same outcome. Two identical inputs can move through the same process and arrive at different conclusions. One completes, the other pauses. Another returns without resolution. Another appears to clear but only partially. None of these outcomes are framed as errors. Nothing is rejected outright. Nothing is flagged as invalid. Nothing is formally denied. The system does not say no. It simply does not always say yes. This difference is subtle enough to be dismissed at first. Most people assume the cause is local, a timing issue, a backlog, a temporary delay, a routine irregularity. They try again. Sometimes the second attempt clears, sometimes it does not. There is no visible pattern. The process itself remains consistent. The steps do not change. The language does not shift. The interface does not signal difference. What changes is response, not response time alone, not speed or efficiency, resolution. For a long time, participation implied progress. If an action was correct, it moved forward. If a request followed procedure, it resolved. If the steps were completed, the outcome arrived. That expectation still exists, but it is no longer reliable. Participation is still possible. It is simply no longer sufficient. The system continues to accept input. It does not refuse engagement. It does not withdraw access. It allows entry. What it no longer guarantees is completion. This is not communicated explicitly. There is no rule explaining the difference, no threshold announced, no condition stated. From within the system, nothing instructs participants to behave differently, and yet behavior begins to change. Not immediately, not consciously. People do not stop participating. They continue to submit. They continue to attempt. They continue to follow the steps. But they begin to notice that effort alone does not produce consistent results. Not because effort is being punished. Not because effort is being ignored. Because effort is no longer decisive. This does not feel like exclusion. Nothing is closed. Nothing is locked. Nothing is revoked. Access remains open. But access no longer implies resolution. The distinction between entry and completion becomes more visible. At first, this distinction feels abstract, a minor inconvenience, an inconsistency that can be worked around. People assume it will correct itself. They wait. Waiting does not produce clarity. Responses arrive unevenly. Some actions resolve quickly. Others remain unresolved without explanation. Some return altered. Some appear to clear but leave secondary steps incomplete. The system does not acknowledge the difference. It does not clarify why one action resolves while another does not. It does not need to. Selectivity does not require explanation when it is procedural. The system does not frame its behavior as selective. It remains neutral. It neither favors nor opposes. It responds. And response is no longer symmetrical. This asymmetry is quiet. It does not escalate. It does not compound. It simply persists. Because it persists, participants begin to adapt, not by withdrawing, not by resisting, by adjusting expectation. They stop assuming that correct action will lead to completion. They begin to wait longer before acting again. They check more frequently. They resubmit cautiously. They reduce repetition. None of this is coordinated. No instruction tells them to slow down. No signal tells them to hesitate. The system teaches restraint through response alone. This restraint is not fear-based. There is no urgency, no stress. It is procedural. When outcomes vary, modeling becomes harder. When modeling becomes harder, confidence narrows. Not collapses, narrows. People do not panic. They simply stop assuming. Assumption is replaced with uncertainty, not uncertainty about rules. uncertainty about resolution. The system still functions. Nothing breaks, nothing stalls globally. From the outside, activity continues. But internally, participation becomes more deliberate. Participants stop treating entry as synonymous with success. They still act. They just act with less expectation. This change is easy to miss. It does not show up as failure. It does not produce obvious friction. It shows up as hesitation, a pause before resubmitting, a delay before initiating the next step, a decision to wait rather than proceed immediately. The system does not demand this, it induces it, not through enforcement, through inconsistency. When outcomes are no longer predictable, behavior becomes conservative. Not because of fear, because prediction is no longer reliable. This does not require explanation. Participants do not need to understand why selectivity exists in order to feel it. They experience it as variance. Variance changes posture. For a long time, posture was forward. Participation leaned into the system. Now posture becomes neutral, not withdrawn, not defensive, measured. Participation still occurs, but it is no longer automatic. Automatic participation was never a rule. It was an assumption. That assumption is eroding, not dramatically, not visibly, quietly. The system does not announce that clearance has become selective. It does not frame selectivity as policy. It remains procedural. Clearance happens. Clearance does not happen. Both outcomes are treated as normal. The absence of explanation prevents reaction. If the system explained itself, participants would respond. Without explanation, they simply adapt. This adaptation does not produce a single behavior. Some people wait, some try again, some reduce frequency, some stop expecting resolution entirely. All of these responses are rational. None of them are instructed. This is how systems shape behavior without directive, by responding unevenly. The difference between works and does not work becomes situational, not contextualized by visible rules. Two identical actions can produce different results. This undermines confidence in modeling, and modeling is how participants decide how much effort to apply. When modeling fails, effort narrows, not because participants disengage, because they cannot predict payoff. Effort becomes cautious. It is not withdrawn. The system does not penalize this. It accepts input. Activity continues, but the texture of activity changes. There is more checking, more waiting, more observation, and less assumption. This does not slow the system in aggregate. It redistributes responsibility, shifting it back toward the participant, not announced, implicit. If completion is not guaranteed, participants must carry uncertainty longer. They cannot hand off responsibility at entry. They must wait for confirmation. That waiting is not stressful. It is simply longer than before. The system still accepts input, but it does not immediately relieve participants of responsibility. Responsibility lingers. This lingering is subtle. It does not feel like a burden. It feels like delay. For a long time, delay was rare. Now delay is uneven. Some actions delay, some do not. This variance matters. When delay is consistent, participants adapt easily. When delay is selective, participants hesitate, not because they are unsure what to do, but because they are unsure what will happen next. The system does not force resolution, it allows resolution. Allowance is not guarantee. This distinction reshapes participation quietly. No one announces the change. No one points to a moment where selectivity began. There is no before and after. There is only now, where clearance sometimes completes and sometimes does not. Now, participation does not imply progress. Correct action is necessary, but insufficient. The system remains calm. There is no signal to act urgently, no pressure to respond, no demand for interpretation. This calm prevents escalation. Participants are not forced to conclude anything. They simply adjust their behavior. This is how systems change without appearing to, by remaining operational while altering response, by keeping procedures intact while modifying outcomes, by allowing participation while withholding consistency. This is not instability. Instability announces itself. This is variance. Variance accumulates quietly, not into stress, into adaptation. People begin to notice patterns that are not stable enough to name. They cannot articulate why some actions resolve and others do not. They stop trying to explain. Explanation would require assumptions they can no longer support. They accept inconsistency as part of the environment. This acceptance is not agreement, it is accommodation. Accommodation reduces friction. It prevents reaction. The system does not need to defend itself. There is nothing to argue with. Nothing is broken. Nothing is denied. Everything still works, just not the same way for everyone, every time. This unevenness is not framed as unfair. Fairness would require intent. The system does not display intent. It displays response. Response does not argue. Response does not explain. Response simply occurs. Participants respond to response. This loop is quiet. No feedback is requested. No correction is offered. The system does not adjust itself to participant expectation. Participants adjust themselves to system behavior. This is the inversion. For a long time, systems were predictable enough that participants modeled them confidently. Now, modeling requires constant updating. Constant updating consumes attention. Attention increases caution. Caution narrows participation. It does not eliminate it. The system does not mind this. It continues to operate. It does not reward speed. It does not punish slowness. It simply responds. Some responses clear fully, some do not. Over time, participants stop expecting symmetry. This is the key shift. Symmetry was never guaranteed, it was assumed. That assumption is dissolving, not dramatically, without announcement, without consequence. The system remains functional, but functionality no longer implies sameness. Sameness mattered more than success. When outcomes were consistent, participants trusted the process. When outcomes vary, participants trust themselves less. Not emotionally, procedurally. They wait longer before committing. They seek confirmation. They avoid stacking actions. They hesitate to escalate. None of this is required. It is induced. The system does not instruct caution. It creates conditions where caution is rational. This is not restriction. Restriction would require enforcement. This is selectivity. Selectivity allows the system to remain open while shaping behavior. Nothing is closed. Nothing is revoked. Participation is still welcome. Completion is conditional. The conditions are not stated. They are embedded in response. This embedding prevents challenge. You cannot argue with response. You can only adapt to it. Adaptation spreads quietly. One participant hesitates. Another waits. Another stops expecting completion. Another reduces frequency. None of this is coordinated. No one knows if others are experiencing the same thing. The system does not reveal aggregate behavior. Each participant experiences selectivity as personal variance. This isolation prevents collective interpretation. Without collective interpretation, there is no reaction, only individual adjustment. This is how selectivity can persist without stress. Nothing forces a conclusion. Nothing demands response. The system continues. Clearance happens. Clearance does not happen. Both are normal. Over time, this becomes background. Participants stop noticing individual instances. They internalize variance. They assume outcomes may differ. This assumption changes posture permanently, not dramatically, quietly. The system does not collapse. It does not accelerate. It does not escalate. It simply operates under a different condition, a condition where participation is accepted but not guaranteed to resolve. This is not a warning. It is not a forecast. It is not a message. It is an environment where clearance is selective, and nothing needs to happen next for this to matter.